Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Finster, who's going to help me explain my puzzlement over a work I just didn't get until I heard the version by... Tell them. Which version did I hear? Huh? Yeah? No? Okay. The work was Handel's Water Music, which I've talked about before. I don't get it. I had a problem with this piece. I couldn't understand why people were treating it as though it were some sort of screaming masterpiece. It was pleasant. I mean, I got it. But it's just a bunch of little Baroque dance sniglets that were written for a barge trip down the River Thames. And, it wasn't that the music was bad or that I didn't think I understood it. It was simply that the reputation of the work was so much grander than the obvious musical results, at least it seemed to me. And that's also a problem. That's often a problem in classical music. People make these grandiose claims. It's classical. And with Handel, it's a particular issue because he didn't write a lot of purely instrumental music. I mean, he was an opera guy, a vocal music guy. I always loved Messiah. I mean, I loved Handel. But the water music, it's like, why are people making a big deal about this thing? Why does it get recorded every 15 minutes? And it was all the more off-putting because, when I was young and first listening to classical music and discovering it at random on my own from my parents, my mother's record collection particularly, I mean, we didn't have much Baroque music. Baroque music was terra incognita, and I found the whole style somewhat irritating. The constant clanging of the harpsichord in the background and the motoric rhythms and the lack of romantic sort of emotional passion. I grew up on Dvorak and Rachmaninoff and Brahms and Beethoven, and when you have that kind of background, getting into other styles, especially if you're young and you don't have a very long attention span, takes time. Right, Finster? Huh? Yes. See, your attention span is about 3 seconds long, as far as I can tell. So anyway, it's an issue. It was really an issue for me, and I just never got it. In some ways, I still don't. I think that it is a general issue in the classical music world, the inability of people to be discerning and simply say, well, this is not as great as that. And there's nothing wrong with Handel tossing off a jeu d'esprit or, writing short, pleasant little dance sniglets for the king. I mean, that's very nice of him. And it may be a charming work, but is it great? What I resented, perhaps, wasn't so much the music, but the constant being beaten over the head with how wonderful it was supposed to be, when I just didn't hear it. However, there was a recording, and you probably know what it is if you've been watching these videos, that totally turned me on to the water music. And it goes to show you just how important a great performance is. It was this one. Alexander Gibson with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra on Chandos. Now, not only are the performances unbelievably lively, and I don't mean fast, I mean lively, I mean vivacious, I mean full of life, and they're invigorating. They're like a good, sharp tonic after you shave or something like that. They really wake you up, which is great. That's number one. But number two, the sonics. It's just one of those engineering miracles where everything went beautifully and the instruments just seem to be illuminated from within. There's a glow to this performance that I've seldom heard on anything. And I would listen to this just because I love the sheer sound of it. And that's a lot. That's a Handelian thing, by the way. Handel was a master of timbre, of sonority. And when you make his music glow the way they do here, it doesn't matter if he's, setting the Dublin telephone directory. Hope they didn't have telephones. The the Dublin calling card directory or address book or whatever it is. It just doesn't matter. It sounds fabulous. And so I listened to it just to revel in the joyful sounds that everybody was making. And having reveled, I found that my reservations, against the work generally sort of fell away. I was no longer so annoyed at the fact that a piece of occasional music, which is what this is, it's very occasional, was getting celebrated to the point where I think it was being credited with a greatness that it hadn't earned. The truth of the matter is that if the performance is this committed and this beautifully captured and projected on disc, then that aesthetic issue is semantics. It's irrelevant. It becomes unimportant, and I could simply love Handel's water music as I do today. And so that's how I did it. I don't think Finster here is quite there, are you? No, you haven't quite gotten to that point, but you will. You will. You got to give it a chance. That's what it boils down to, right, sweetie? Yes, exactly. She couldn't agree more. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.